Hello, hello. All right. Bienvenidos. My name is Nicholas Vega. I'm the curator and director of exhibitions here at the Grammy Museum. And I'm so excited to be standing in front of you all and welcoming you here today. We're in for an amazing night. Before we get into the panelists and me introducing the moderator, I just want to provide some context. Actually, first, let me ask a couple questions. Show of hands, maybe round of applause since the lights are a little bright. Do we have any museum members in the house tonight? All right. What about first-time museum goers? Is this the first time for anyone here tonight? All right. I'm going to remember your faces because I expect to see you here again. In all seriousness, thank you all for coming out tonight. Middle of the week, downtown L.A. We sincerely appreciate this, and as I said before, it is going to be an amazing night. So we start talking about, East Side Sound, the music of East L.A., the Chicano Movement, the Grammy Museum. How does that come together? What's that connection there? I'll tell you, orale, that's right. To talk about how we got here today, we need to go back a few years. We need to go back to 2008 when we opened up the Grammy Museum here at LA Live. And the very first exhibition that we had on public view on this same floor right outside here was the same exhibit that's up today. It's called Songs of Conscious, Sounds of Freedom. And what that is that this is a story that really examines and celebrates politically charged and socially conscious music throughout American history, going as far back as the American Revolution and all the way up until today. So the themes that are presented, the topics that are presented in this exhibition that we launched in 2008, very much relevant today. I'd say even more so today than it was, 2008. We look at the labor movement of the 1930s. We look at music associated with the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s, anti-apartheid music associated with the anti-Vietnam War. And then as we start to look at early 21st century or more contemporary times, we're looking at Black Lives Matter. We're looking at LGBTQ, fight for equality, stop Asian hate. So over the course of the past couple of years, the curatorial team, the executive team, I would say pretty much every member of the museum here said, we need to bring this show back, and we need to bring it back in a big way. And in order for us to do that, we really wanted to celebrate local stories. We wanted to talk about our community of Los Angeles and look at the story through that particular lens. So there's a certain section of the exhibition that's brand new. It wasn't on display in the first iteration, and it's called the Sounds of Los Angeles. And in that area, we look at, we got to give it up for our hometown. In that area, we look at music associated with a number of historic events that have shaped our identity here as Angelenos. And there are also a number of events that are pretty tough to deal with, and sadly, we're still dealing with. We talk about issues, music associated with economic disparity and poverty, gang violence, police brutality. We also look at music from the 1965 Watts riots, Watts Rebellion, the 92 uprisings and riots here in LA. And the reason why we're here today to come full circle is to really celebrate and honor and talk about the music associated with the Chicano movement of the 1960s and 1970s. So that's why we're here today. This exhibition, kind of a shameless curatorial plug, this exhibition is on display through May 8th, Sunday, May 8th, my birthday no less, Mother's Day. So please come on back, check it out. We're open 6 days a week. That said, I definitely need to go to my notes because we have a moderator that's going to take us through this journey today, who's unlike no other. She earned her PhD in literature from the University of California, San Diego, where she trained in Chicano literature and culture and U.S. American studies. Get this. She's a recent U.S. Fulbright scholar to the University of Limerick in Ireland, where she completed, that is definitely worth a round of applause, where she completed her monograph, Moslandia, Morrissey Fans in the Borderlands. I'm reading it right now. You need to read it. It is an amazing read. Take my word for it. Also, she's published widely in academic and popular venues about music, culture, and queerness, and she currently writes about beer and other beverages for the James Beard Award-winning site, LA Taco. Please help me in welcoming to the stage, mi hermana, Dr. Melissa Hidalgo.
It's so bright up here. I don't remember the last time I was up on a stage. But what a wonderful thing to be here. What a gift. Thank you to Nick and to Veronica Terriquez and everybody who's going to be on the panel, who I'm about to introduce. But I just wanted to say thank you all again for coming out on a Wednesday and for being here to support this program. I also just want to give a little baby shout out to my grandmother. She passed away. Today, in fact, in 2006, she went to Garfield High School. And in fact, my mother and my aunts and I went to Garfield High School, I want to say in 2008, it was around the 40th anniversary of the Chicano blowouts, to watch a benefit show by Los Lobos, Little Willie G, the Midnighters of War. So I feel connected to this music, even though I didn't grow up in this period. I was born in 1974, so a little after. So it is a privilege and an honor to be here. And I say that with all of my corazón. So thank you. But you're here to watch and to hear from our panelists. And so allow me to introduce our stellar panel for the evening. I first want to start off by introducing probably the man most responsible for having the guest that we have on our panel for today. And this is Mark Guerrero. He is the son of Chicano music legend, Lalo Guerrero. Mark began playing in bands at the age of 12. In the 1960s, he recorded 2 singles with his popular East Los Angeles band, Mark and the Escorts. In 1971, he wrote and recorded his first solo single, Lila, Love Me Tonight, and produced by Lou Adler. Soon after, he released 2 singles, Rock and Roll Queen and I'm Brown, on Capitol Records. Following in his father's footsteps and staying true to his heritage, Guerrero's I'm Brown is a thematic Chicano track influenced by the color of his skin. Artists such as Herb Alpert, Trini Lopez, and Sean Romero have recorded Guerrero's songs throughout the years. In 1998, he performed at a Tex-Mex concert in Paris, France, alongside his father and famed Chicano accordionist Flaco Jimenez. Guerrero is also featured in The Land of a Thousand Dances, the book by Tom Waldman and David Reyes that chronicles the history of Chicano rock in Southern California. Through his music and scholarship, he keeps his father's legacy alive, contributing to the advancement of the Chicano movement. So please welcome our first panelist to the stage, Mark Guerrero.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Welcome, Mark. And our next panelist probably doesn't need much of an introduction, Willie Garcia, AKA the legendary Little Willie G, began his musical career in the early 1960s. He is best known as a vocalist for the East L.A. band The Midnighters. According to his amigo and colleague here, Mark Guerrero, Little Willie G, along with Little Ray Ramirez, were the brightest singing stars in East LA's golden age of rock and roll, the 1960s. Jimenez. Little Ray Jimenez, yes. At a time when several other East Side bands enjoyed national hit records, Little Willie G and his band, The Midnighters, always managed to be the headliners everywhere they performed. They had the sound, image, and showmanship, and the charisma to do so. Their musical style was a mix of R&B, ballads, and British invasion music. British invasion music. Yes, an invasion for sure. Little Willie G and the Midnighters made several albums and many singles that were very popular, especially here in Southern California. Their version of Land of a Thousand Dances reached number 67 on the national charts, and they enjoyed several local and regional hits. In 2012, Little Willie G and Mark Guerrero were invited by Luis Perez of Los Lobos to perform as guest artists in a show, which followed a performance of a play Louis co-wrote, Evangeline, the Queen of Make-Believe. The play, which is inspired by Los Lobos' song Evangeline, is about an East LA devoted daughter by day and Hollywood go-go dancer by night. The story takes place in the 1960s amid the political turbulence of the Vietnam War and the East LA student walkouts. So without further ado, let's welcome Little Willie G to our stage.
Hey, Willie.
Hello.
Orale.
Orale. Our next panelist, born Geraldine Juanita Gonzalez, is also known as simply Geree, like Madonna and Cher before her, or after her, I should say. Beyonce, you know, Geree. She's a Chicana soul and R&B singer from East LA. Geree recorded and released an album on MCA Records in the early 80s, as well as 2 CDs for an independent label in the 1990s. In the mid-90s, she played numerous concerts as a featured vocalist with the legendary Chicano band El Chicano. And in 1976, Geree participated on a historic album recorded in support of Cesar Chavez's United Farm Workers Union, the UFW, called Si Se Puede, which was produced by Art Brambila, who we'll meet in a second, and released on the Pan American record label. Geree sang in many bands through the 70s and 80s, including the Village Callers, Chico, and Poverty Train, who became a favorite of Hawaii's Don Ho, due to their touring in Hawaii, I guess, many times. In 1997, Geree released a 4-song EP, which included the song Mijita, written by Mark Guerrero, and which she'll perform later on tonight. So please welcome Geree to the stage. Hello.
Geree.
Geree. And speaking of Art Brambila, music producer Art Brambila grew up in Lincoln Heights, East L.A. Brambila was prolific in the 1970s as a founder of a music production company called Brown Bag Productions. He secured major record deals for Chicano rock artists like Tierra, R.I.P., Yankee, and yours truly, because he wrote this, Mark Guerrero. He wrote everything that I'm reading, thanks to him. He also created a television show, The Mean Salsa Machine, which I didn't know was a Latino show that apparently competed with American Bandstand and Soul Train in Los Angeles back in the day. Thanks to Cesar Chavez's connections with the Coca-Cola Company, which is a whole other story you can read about on Mark's website, and with a major sponsor in hand, which was KHJ Channel 9. KHJ Channel 9, bought the show for 13 weeks. 3 shows were shot every 3rd Sunday. The show became very popular and actually beat American Bandstand and Soul Train in the local LA ratings every Saturday. Brambila was able to book major acts for the show, including Donna Summer, Rick Springfield, Al Green, Morris Alpert's of Feelings fame, The Four Tops, and Latin music stars Ray Barreto and Ralphie Pagan. In 1976, as a result of meeting Cesar Chavez and wanting to do something for him in return for his help in securing sponsorship for the Mean Salsa Machine, Art Brambila got the idea to do an album called Si Se Puede, Yes We Can, in support of the UFW, with proceeds going straight to the farm workers. It was a triumph and an album Cesar Chavez regards as a musical document of the Chicano era. Please welcome Art Brambila to the stage. And last but not least, our own Dr. Terriquez of the UCLA Chicano Studies Research Center. Dr. Veronica Terriquez joins us as professor and director of the Chicano Studies Research Center at UCLA. She received her doctorate in sociology from UCLA, a master's in education from UC Berkeley, and her bachelor's in sociology from Harvard University. Often taking an intersectional approach, her research focuses on social inequality, immigration, incorporation, and transitions to adulthood. She is interested in understanding how institutional policies and practices can be responsive to the needs of low-income immigrant, Black, and Indigenous communities. She has published widely in journals and disseminated research in collaboration with schools, unions, community organizers, and local governments. Terriquez's research is geared toward policy relevance. She has received major grants from the Irvine Foundation, the California Endowment, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as fellowships from the Ford Foundation and the Stanford Center for the Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences. Please welcome our mera mera, Dr. Veronica Terriquez. Well, I hope you don't mind, I'm gonna have a seat now. We have a lot of questions, so our goal for the night is to hear from our panelists. You all came to hear some great stories from them, I think, of the Chicano era and the Chicano movement. And I'd like to actually start with, it seems like an obvious question, but maybe not so much. The title of this panel today is called The Sounds of East L.A. and the Chicano Movement in the exhibition. Talk about the sounds. I want to know, what did East L.A. sound like in the 1960s? What made these sounds? What sounds marked East LA during this period?
Who are you asking?
Anybody who wants to start. This is up for the panel.
I think the kids. Can you hear me all right? Yes. I think the kids in East L.A. In the '60s were influenced by various musics from across the country for many, many years. I think that they had a somewhat of a unique sound in that they were influenced by so many different styles, and they were doing obviously American pop, rock, Latin music, a little of everything. But I think that there was a distinct flavor to it. And if you don't mind my getting into this, I spent a lot of years at Capitol Records before I became a manager and producer. It was very difficult to explain to the executives there that there was a distinct sound as there was in different regions across the country with various cultures and various ethnic people. I can only say that in 1965, 68, around that time, the place was booming with talent, young, beautiful talent, with great voices, distinctive styles of singing. And in my years at Capitol Records, it took me a long, long time to convince the executives there that they should go and check out this beautiful talent that was in the East Side. Had a lot of problems in trying to convince them. They used to come into meetings and the top executives and claim having seen groups across the country and single artists. And, you know, they'd fly out in first class and stay in the big hotels, and we'd sit in these big marketing meetings, and they'd, but they wouldn't cross the river. And this angered me. I was a young man at that time, a young executive in the marketing side. And I tried for several years before I convinced them to start listening to talent that you've heard of. Little Willie G, Mark Guerrero, Geree, the Salas brothers, who, by the way, are my nephews. There were just so many. George Ochoa, Eddie Serrano, so much talent, but the executives at Capitol Records or at any record company just wouldn't cross the river. I was an angry young man at that time because, first of all, I was very active in the Chicano Movement. I was part of the group called Justicia. And here I was in a position to do something about it, and it took a long time to convince them. But getting back to his question, there was a unique sound there, there's unique talent, and I'm glad that they finally recognized it.
Thank you.
Well, add a little bit to that, Art. Growing up, we were exposed to so many different genres, you know. I remember being 6, 7 years old, and my dad bought a piece of furniture that had a record player in it. It was a radio. And he brought home this 78 record with a sort of purplish silver label, Capitol Records. And it was Nat King Cole singing That's All. So that's one of the songs. And then radio was like a family friend, right, to us. We didn't have a TV yet. So radio was real cool. And there was KRKD, which was sort of like a country and western type movie. There was Radio Cali. So we were exposed to all
KGFJ.
this. KGFJ, you know, R&B. And well, that was later. that was later, girl. But we were exposed to so many different genres, and I think ultimately, after all that was filtered through our sensibilities, it came out in our music, our personality. It helped shape the personality of what we did. And consequently, I was sharing with Geree a little bit earlier that I got my first gig with a band in 1960 because no one that they auditioned wanted to sing Mexican music. The band asked me, did I know any boleros? And I told them, yeah. They said, which one? The whole band leaned in. I said, creí cerca del mar, Gema, sabor a mí, you know, the usuals. And they said, what key? And that got me the gig because the other guys were more interested in singing Elvis and rock and roll, which was really cool too. But I discovered that I could do that as well with them. And I got my first gig doing that. And later on, Hilburn, I think it was, from the Times, caught us at the Hollywood Bowl. It was Latin Night Under the Stars. And Tony DeMarco, he was the guy that put that together. And we told him, so what do you want us to do? He says, be yourselves. And we were. We did, you know, our normal set, and we threw Tu Despedida in there, and, you know, Strangers in the Night, and, of course, Whittier Boulevard and Land of a Thousand Dances and whatnot, Jump, Jive, and Harmonize. And he wrote that the Midnighters, a band in search of a song. And I just said, he doesn't get us. If we want to work, you know, you want to work in East L.A. or you get hired for a wedding reception or a quinceañera or a baptismal, you know, you got to play all this stuff. And so that, I think, really contributed to our sound. Growing up, it's in our DNA even to this day.
Well, it's interesting that in the 60s, the radio stations weren't like today. You know, they played everything. You'd hear Elvis, Frank Sinatra, the Beatles, all in the same charts, all in the same station. Now you got cool jazz, you know, separate stations for everything. Everything went, right? Yeah, so we were hearing everything. And we took it all in. But we generally, the East LA groups just followed the trends of what was going on with surf music, R&B, whatever. And British invasion, psychedelic music. But in the end, in the late 60s, that's when we all started to more Latinize, right? That's when the group started becoming Malo and Tierra, and the Chicano pride started coming out, and more Latin percussion in the groups. That didn't come till the later 60s, early 70s, but we got an education playing everything coming up.
It sounds like the Sounds of East LA, then, you know, to call it sort of Chicano almost means to refer to the mezcla, right, to the mix. Right, to the kind of integrative, you know, where LA is obviously very multicultural, to use that term, multiracial, and, you know, and it sort of brings me actually to my next question. Unless you wanted to talk about sound, Geree, did you have something to contribute around the sound of East LA at this time?
Is this on?
Hello? Her mic's not on.
Can we get Jeree's mic on, please?
Uh-oh.
You might have a little slit, or little button.
It's on. Oh, it's on now.
Get it closer.
Hello. I didn't get started singing, though, until the late 60s. So early 60s, mid 60s. And that was by chance. I was going to East LA College.
Hey, East LA College.
Huskies.
Husky. Yes. And a girlfriend of mine that we used to hang out in the lounge. They called it the college with cigarettes, or the high school with cigarettes. Whatever. Anyway, we would sit there and we'd sing to the music that they were playing on the intercom. There was a DJ there. Wow. That was actually playing 45s. Hello? And there was a band that was there that would hang out with us, and she says, oh, Geree and I are going to go audition for your band. That was the group called That Happy Few. Nobody knows them. Okay. And so I sang with them for a little while, but before I did, I had to ask for permission from my mother. She was very strict. My dad had passed away a few years before, and I had to get the okay. And she asked me, she says, well, how do you know you can sing? And I said, well, how do I know I can't? And she said, okay, but I'm going with you because I don't know these boys. So she went with me. She was very strict. God bless her. And so I went to audition, and guess what I sang for my audition?
Sabor a mí.
That's all.
Ooh.
And guess what she auditioned with? That's all. That's the only song I knew all the way through. Okay, so I continued with them for a little while, and then I got a call from Hector Rivera. Okay, and Hector was informed by another friend of mine, Michael Mercado. You got to go hear the singer. She's a singer. Da 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 da. And so he called my home, spoke to my mother to see if I could go and audition for the Village Callers. So I went, and the song I auditioned for them was Sabor a mí. And so I got hired right there on the spot. And from that point on, I just continued to sing with different groups. You know, I went from the Village Callers, and then I got bumped. And I went to the organized set, and then back to the Village Callers, and then the Village Callers changed to... No, that was Ernie.
Poverty Train?
Poverty Train.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And I know, we were real pobres. And we would go on the road. We went on the road several times to Hawaii, like you said in the thing. And Don Ho did come and visit us. He invited us to play for his grandson's first birthday in the crater, Diamond Head Crater. Yeah. And then he invited us to his show. He invited me to sing with his band, which had to be pre-rehearsed. And so I've done a few things like that, you know. There's more to come, but you're talking about the 60s, so we're talking about the late 60s, early 70s.
Or, yeah, I mean, you know, at some point we can probably address what happens after the 60s, but, you know, for sure. Did you want to add something too, Dr. Terriquez?
So I wasn't there in the 60s, but I got to listen to the music.
Oh.
So my father came from Mexico and first came to Boyle Heights, and he drove around with an Impala, blasting music, probably your music. I can't remember, but there was a lot of music. And one of the things I know that's really important that you all created that has lasted generations is that you blended music from different cultures, from the U.S. cultures, from you took inspiration from African Americans, but from our native Mexican culture as well. And that was so unique and so special and so empowering for people your age. I know this from speaking with my elders, and also just hearing the music myself, to be able to hear the sounds blended and to hear the multiple cultures recognized and not having to choose one or the other. You could be all of these things. And that is incredibly empowering, especially for young people, to feel like arts and culture are being represented so broadly and so beautifully. So I have to thank you all for your beautiful and inspiring work.
Well, that's evidence that our culture, our kids inherit our record collections, right? And it gets passed down. And there was a young lady had me sign a 45, and I was like going, "How old are you?" You know, and so it's a marvelous thing. Music, it's just regenerational.
I think that
in many ways.
When you grow up in a barrio like that, when you grow up kind of isolated from the mainstream, what you really have is each other and music. I remember when my nephews were very, very small, very young, I should say. And we have a very large family. But they were already singing, harmonizing when they were just kids. Yeah, they were influenced primarily by the people in the neighborhood and, of course, the family, all of which had some talents in our singing. So as the kids grow up and they meet other kids, all of that music that they've been playing, everything they've been listening to for so many years, all kinds of blends in and creates something really unique and beautiful. And I think that's what East LA is.
I think this is a perfect segue too to the next question, or the talking point I have, which was also thinking about the impact on youth movements, but also thinking about music as a way to claim space, right, in a place that was trying to redline and segregate our neighborhoods. And so I'm following with this comment, I'm following, in fact, another profesora, doctora Gay Teresa Johnson, who's also a profesora at UCLA. And in 2013, she wrote a book called Spaces of Conflict, Sounds of Solidarity, Music, Race, and Spatial Entitlement in Los Angeles. And Professor Johnson writes about the Midnighters and the song Whittier Boulevard in particular. And she says that this song, Whittier Boulevard by the Midnighters, is, quote, an example of what she calls sonic reclamation, right? So kind of reclaiming space through sound. A kind of sonic reclamation of space by Black, brown, and multiracial audiences in post-war Los Angeles. So let me ask the question of the panel. What communities did your music reach outside of the Chicano and Chicana communities? Like, you know, what impact did your music have, not just for our communities, but outside, right? For the kids that maybe weren't Chicano or were half Chicano and half Filipino, or and also thinking about the impact that your music had on creating awareness of Chicano communities and their demands outside of the communities. So how did your music speak to reach across our community to other communities?
Can I? Please take it. It's a tough one.
You want to take it?
Mark, you take it.
I think this is...
Anybody can, yeah.
It's really a great question.
That's a tough question.
Yeah, it is.
No, man, that's a good
Willie,
question.
Good, I'm making you
Preach.
It is.
gotta think.
Listen, we had three major ingredients: cars, music, and a destination. That's what we had, and so the Boulevard became a gathering place. They came from Orange County. They came from the San Fernando. People came from everywhere because we had these things in common, and it became a social gathering for us. You know, no troublemakers. Few incidents, you know, by pedestrians, but never these guys had beautiful cars, you know, and, you know, they weren't throwing beer bottles at each other. You know, we went there to have fun, to meet each other, share ideas, and so we reached, it went outside the box. There was no, I came to East LA from South Central. You know what I mean? And so, and I was welcomed, you know, because we had these things in common. You know, we loved music, we loved each other, we didn't look down at each other. We talked different, we dressed different, but we were cool. You know,
Good answer, good answer.
and that really just brought us together. So we reached out, especially when we got the record. You know, we started traveling and going to different places, somewhat not prepared for some of the audiences and receptions we got. But as soon as we started playing, they endeared themselves to us. And so we broke down barriers, which was really cool.
Yeah, we were just talking earlier upstairs about that we were insulated. In East LA, we'd play the circuit, and there was mostly Chicanos, and we never thought about race. There was no racism involved. We just lived our lives, played our music. But when we go out of that bubble, we'd run into stuff, you know, like you were talking about. Like Little Ray, when he played at the Santa Monica Civic with the premieres, the people started calling them beaners and, you know, some throwing stuff. But the minute they started kicking butt, and they won the people over by the music. But yeah, a lot of racism was encountered outside of our bubble, especially if you went to other states. But the music usually saved the day.
Yeah, it broke down the wall.
You know, but our music was also very varied. When I began to work with Mark, his style was very different than other artists that were in the brown bag roster. like Yaqui. Yaqui was a hard rock band. Tierra was a Latin rock band. Mark's style was more mainstream, which shows the influence that he had. I know he loved the Beatles and John Lennon. He sounds like them. But getting back to the question about what impact we may have had on a national scale, I'm still disappointed. I'm disappointed that our music has not reached the levels because it's not heard. The major labels still don't understand us. I don't think that discrimination in the entertainment industry is for color. I think it's because of culture. They don't understand this. When I was saying earlier that they wouldn't cross the river to listen to some of our artists, and yet they fly all over the world to listen to one or two groups, they just were not interested. And if we couldn't get the distribution deals that others were getting, we were not being exposed across the country and across the world. Sure, there were some exceptions. Little Willie G busted out big across the country. And much, much later, Tierra did too. Mark and I, he was the very first artist I signed to a major label. Then it was Tierra and Yaqui, Johnny Martinez, Carmen Moreno's. Because I came from the inside of the industry. By the time I got to the outside to become a manager and a producer, I knew what the big labels were thinking. I knew what besides the fact that I knew many of the executives and the different record companies, I had the advantage of knowing what it is they want to hear. So by the time I got to Mark and to other artists that were out there, I was a marketing man. I understood what the record companies wanted. But to get them to distribute our product and to promote our product was a totally different story. I can tell you some racist stories of the things that they said to me, and I won't do it, but they just were not interested. When we would deliver an album or deliver a single to them, they'd say, where are we going to put it? What bin? I mean, is this a Latin guy? Is this a, as if they didn't understand that we were doing American pop rock music. And to this day, I'm angry about that. It just had not spread the way it should because we do not get the kind of attention that others do. I'm sorry.
I remember Art told me at the time that they wanted me to change my last name, from Guerrero, and I refused, and it probably hurt me as far as my career. But they also said, what is this Chicano doing country rock for? And they didn't understand how a Mexican, I'm as American as apple pie. Yes. I'm as American as a taco.
I have an example too. Okay. When I got signed to MCA Universal back in the early 80s, the record label said that I sounded pop, but I wasn't white enough. And that I sounded black, but I wasn't black enough. And I said, well, look at me, I'm a little brown. But they didn't understand and they didn't know what to do with me at the time. We had, I guess you could call a divorce. I got away from the label. We had a happy ending. And a year later, they signed Gloria Estefan and the Miami Sound Machine. Then they knew what to do with a Latina.
This is a good time for me to say this too. Later, I'm going to sing one of my dad's songs. It's a song about Chicano pride and stuff, being a Chicano. But the first two lines, I'll say what the first two lines say. It says, I am a Chicano born on the American side of the border. To Mexico, to Mexicans, I'm a pocho, which is a derogatory term. My brothers don't accept me. The Americans discriminate against me as if I'm a foreigner. So bottom line, we're not quite Mexican in Mexico. We're not quite American here. And that's where we live. And that's why we're always in this little niche market, because record companies don't think we'll sell in Iowa or Maine or in Florida. So it's like, oh, they're local. And they don't understand what a Chicano is or who we are. they would often try to put me and a lot of my Chicano fellow musicians put us in the Latin division. The Latin divisions are Spanish-speaking artists. Oh, Guerrero, let's put him in the Latin division. No, like they never knew what we were. Like we're neither fish nor fowl.
It's divisive, you know, even.
I was very proud of Mark when I came to him to tell him what I had just heard at Capitol Records when I delivered his album to them. They wanted to change his name. And I knew Mark was going to say no, and I didn't want him to do that. So when I got back to the office, and because I represented Mark to Capitol, and I represented Capitol to Mark, I had to tell him what they had told me. And he wouldn't change his name, which made me very proud because, of course, why should we, you know? But it was some tough times, and to this day, they're still changing names. Look, in the early 40s, I wasn't there, but in the early 40s, you all know that Frank Sinatra and Perry Como and a guy named Andres Rabago built that building. They sold enough records in a period of 3 or 4 years that they put that iconic tower on Hollywood and Vine. The first week I worked there, I walked all over Hollywood Boulevard looking for a star with Andy Russell's name. It's not there. Andy Russell does not have his name on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. They made him change his name. He was from Boyle Heights. And
Vicky Carr, Freddie Fender, Richie Valens.
I'm sorry?
Freddie Fender, Vicky Carr.
Could have been
Richie
Zuela.
Valens.
Well, well, a lot of people have changed their names and have done well with it.
Yeah,
you
they
know,
had to.
But,
They were forced to.
But if you don't change your name, I don't know what you can do. You know, but Mark, my hat's off to you.
Well, thank you very much.
Could I thank you for not changing your name?
Yes, you
And
may.
on behalf of so many people that have listened to your music and who aspire to be musicians and who are so proud because you did not change your name. It means so much to so many generations of young people who could relate to you, identify with you, see themselves in you. And it has been empowering and for them to feel comfort in who they are, but it also has been politicizing.
Unfortunately, it did hurt my career tremendously. So nobody knows who the hell I am. Yeah, no, I'm more than that.
I think it speaks to the continued kind of racism in the music industry, but also around constructions of what Latin music is and should sound like in this country. That's palatable to the music executives, right? That's palatable to a sort of crossover audience. We know that Selena, in fact, before she passed, was about to do her English crossover record, and so there are these constant sort of gestures that we have to make to make ourselves legible to them, right? And you're right, they don't understand us. All right, there's maybe a refusal to understand us, right?
Oh, you mentioned my dad. This is important too. You say about my dad. My dad was discriminated against on both sides of the border. In 1958, we moved to Mexico City. He wanted to be a Mexican singing star. He got a major record deal. When it was time to sign the contract, when they found out he was born in Tucson, Arizona, it was canceled. So he was discriminated against down there. Up here, he was not allowed to sing in English. So he was as great as he was in this little niche market as well,
I mean, this might be an interesting time too to think about what does Chicano music then sound like today in 2022? Do we have Chicano music now? Do we have to be a little bit maybe more capacious in how we think about music as Chicano or not? So how do we bring Chicano music up to speed? Does it exist right now in 2022, or is it called something else? Can it exist in 2022?
Chicano music is music made by Chicanos,
Right.
So you got some groups today that are playing cumbias. You have some groups that are rapping. All styles you could think of. La Santa Cecilia, Tex-Maniacs,
Yeah.
you know, Tex-Mex.
Los Lobos.
You know, whoever. But so just Chicanos making all different kinds of music, and many are starting to break through on some level. But it's never the huge, big level, but it's a decent level.
The one thing about Chicano music today, I think, is that much of it is bilingual. You know, there's a lot of Spanish sung with you. You know, recently look, I'm not an artist. I can't sing worth a damn, but I've written a few songs, and it seems that the bilingual songs that I have written have done better than the English. But I think that if Latinos, Chicanos would write, well, first of all, to write more, because the Chicano young talent has not been known for writing their songs. Most of what was being done in the 60s and 70s were being covered songs. Some of the biggest hits, Tierras Together, was a cover song. But it's time, I think, that the young Chicano artists start writing. I think we need more writers. And if they add some Spanish, look, way back in the 40s, Andy Russell made history by singing, actually Mexican songs. He would translate some English lyric into it, Amor, most of his songs. Point is, it seems to be going in that trend, and I'm happy to hear that, to have a few Spanish words into some English lyric with the new Chicano sound.
So I'm also thinking of bands, you know, bands today like Y La Bamba, for example, you know, that we might hear on radio stations like KCRW, or even someone like Hope Sandoval, who is from Mazzy Star, and Hope Sandoval is from East L.A., you know, and to your point, Mark, Chicano music is music played by Chicanos. Right. But part of my question, though, is I feel like sometimes I'm a little bit of a dinosaur or something, because Chicano in some ways feels almost stuck in the past, right? Because I'm not sure how many youth, and maybe this is a question for you, Terriquez, is how many youth actually still identify as Chicano, first of all? Because I know we have that kind of Latinx or this other label that, you know, mainstream America, especially music, right? The Latin Grammys, right? And so I'm just curious, does Chicano music, you know, is it tied to the movimiento era, right? Or is this something that we can maybe refashion or sort of place within our context now and still call it Chicano music?
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever stop calling it Chicano music. I think what we need to do, as I mentioned, it's very divisive. The terms, Hispanic, you know, what the heck does that mean, right? Asian. It's like there's so many different, you know, nationalities within that, and basically it becomes divisive rather than bringing us together. And so I'm a Chicano. I was born here. My mother's from El Fuerte, Sinaloa. My dad's from Douglas, Arizona. But I was born here. My brothers were born here. My sister was born here. And I dropped my phone right now, but that's all right. What would we do without that thing? But I'm a Chicano. I grew up in South Central L.A., and I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood. Germans, Irish, Filipinos, blacks, Jews, and I even hate the term that I grew up colorblind, because I wasn't. But there was a respect that was taught through that. And if we were playing with the Filipinos and they invited us to eat, hey, we got to learn about Filipino food. You know what I'm saying? And so culturally, we grew up diverse, and it was beautiful, because there was this fabric of everything, music and everything, and all that just seems to mix itself into our thought processes. Everything that we write about, you know, becomes important, because it's not about me, it's about us. And that's what Chicano music does. It's about us. It's not about me. Whittier Boulevard, we stole that song. We stole it from the Rolling Stones. They had a song called 2120 Michigan Avenue, which was an homage to Chess Records. That was and so we took it.
And ran.
It was an accident.
Right.
It was an accident. We love the Stones, right? We looked like the Beatles, but we drove like the Stones, right? And so that song was a warm-up song for us at rehearsal. And it was an accident because after we recorded Land of a Thousand Dances, you know, a lot of thought went into that song. Yeah, the na part. A lot of thought went in. We needed another song, right, to follow that, a follow-up song. And a friend of ours, Sammy Martinez, who changed his name, right? He changed his name to Hearth. He wrote a song for us called Evil Love, right? Evil Love. It was evil. And so we went into the studio and we recorded Evil Love. And our engineer, Bruce Morgan, he says, cool, what's the B-side? And we all went, right? And so we said, well, let's do that song that we're always jamming on at rehearsal, right? And it was spontaneous. Everything was spontaneous. It was one take. And when the record went to the radio stations, the DJs that knew us, they played Evil Love, and they went, that's not the Midnighters. There must be a mistake. They turned it over, and they played Whittier Boulevard. And the rest is history. So they say. Right? So I'm a Chicano, ese.
Órale. Well,
So I think it's important to recognize that on the East Side, there's just been this long history of music being produced by brown people. And there's a sense of pride in that. And sometimes the terms that we use to identify ourselves evolve over time because we want to be inclusive. So, you know, there's a good number of Centroamericanos living on the East Side. So sometimes, you know, the groups that came after you all identify as Latino, Latina, or now Latinx, to make sure that they're developing a sense of ownership and building community amongst themselves. So there's this long tradition that continues, even though the terms used might evolve.
Yeah, I'm like, we can stop there. Because but we won't. I think I have one more question for the panel before we turn it over to you all in your question and answers. I'm sure you have some burning questions that you might want to ask our panelists. But let's end on this notion of community and sort of the notion of the music for us, right? Sort of for us and by us. And maybe or sort of last question before we turn it over is to think about how this era of East Side music continues to influence then the youth of today. If it does, do you see any influence of the era of the 60s and 70s Chicano era? Do you see any sort of influence from that time and that music in youth activism today? Do you see that in the communities playing out in other ways? In other words, do you see any sense of how and why this music was so important to this era and to this generation? Do we see that influence continue to play out and inspire youth activism today?
I can say this. I was just involved. I've been involved with this project called A Great Day in East L.A. with a young guy named Piero Giunti. He's half Chicano, half Italian. But I interviewed about 140 different artists, and I brought in all the older guys, you know, from the 50s, the 60s, 70s, into the 80s, and he got all the Chicano artists from East L.A. from the 90s, 2000s. So I got to interview these people that I'd never heard of or never knew about, and I was amazed that they were really activists, more activists even than we were. You know, there's a lot of activism. There's a lot of they've evolved in a lot of ways, and I was very impressed with their activism and their intelligence, and you know, again, wide variety of music styles, but very talented and like I said, very active politically.
I'm curious if you know too, like what are, you know, if in the 60s we know very well, for example, about the moratorium against the Vietnam War, right? We know about the East LA blowouts, walkouts, right? What are the issues today that are that Chicano and Latinx youth are mobilizing around?
Defund the police.
Defund the police. Say more, Dr. Terriquez.
The Ukraine right now, a lot of stuff's going on.
Ukraine.
support for that.
Yeah.
I'm writing a book on youth activism today, and one of the chapters is on the East Side. And the students there have continued to use walkouts as a strategy to get attention around different issues, whether it was protesting the election of Trump, or protesting gun violence, or protesting police violence. And there's always music involved. And it's a tradition that lives on the East Side, perhaps more so than in many other places, because you all kind of set that foundation to really expand outreach through music. Because a lot of times people need to feel, the possibility for change. And that music is inspiring and kind of ignites action. So that continues. And one group that's part of the work that I'm doing now is Las Cafeteras, also out of the East Side. And they're going to be getting the vote out with young people as they have before. So they'll be doing this in 2022, and they've done it a few elections beforehand.
One of the things I learned on that project was that I'm so proud that the East LA music has never stopped. I mean, from the 60s to today, there's always been bands. There's the punk era. I don't care what changes in music, hip hop. There's always East LA bands. There's always an East LA scene, and it's never stopped. You know, I love that.
Now I just have to ask this last question. I'm kidding, but one more, I promise. Hopefully it's a fun question, but speaking of music that moves us, I wonder if we can ask our panelists, what do you think is the song that represented the movimiento to you most? What was the most if you had to think of just one song that represented the energy, the politics, the communities of the movimiento, what would that song be from this era? We can start with producer Art down there.
I could tell you the album that represents it most.
Sure, please.
I think that when I was able to convince Los Lobos to do Si Se Puede, and I was able to get Geree in that album, and the Salas brothers in that album, and other various artists, it was the very first album that we did that anyone in America that I know of did for a cause. This was before Band-Aid and before, what's that other one? We did an album to help the United Farm Workers get their message across the country and across the world. Si Se Puede is a classic that to this day is still selling well. If you guys don't have a copy of Si Se Puede, at least go to YouTube or whatever and listen to Geree's Mañana Es Now. This album represents not only the Chicano, the United Farm Workers struggles, but the whole of what the 60s were and what it, to some extent, still is. That is what I think that represents the Chicano movement more than any other that I can think of.
I would have to concur.
I would like to add this, that my song I'm Brown that's in the exhibit now, thank you. And it was in the exhibit in the previous, in 2008, the previous exhibit they had. That song was never promoted. You know, if it had been promoted, maybe it would be the song, you know, but nobody got to hear it. But it did get out there some, and just as an example, somebody emailed me once and said that they bought the record at the time. They were living in Arizona. They were going to an all-white high school. He was the only Chicano in the school. He felt alienated, all that stuff. And he said that record made him feel proud and it helped him get through. So, you know, it made me feel good.
Geree?
Yeah, singing, being asked to sing on the Si Se Puede album was extremely, extremely important to me. And I thank you, Art, for including me.
Hey, you helped make it.
It gives me a lot of orgullo. So, anyway.
Cool.
Last but not least.
Oh, what? You know, Chicano power. You know, that was written about the time when the movement was really, you know, the campus activities and whatnot. And that song today still, you know, rings in those settings a lot. Yeah. At least the term.
Gracias to our panelists. And I think with that, I will turn over now our time for Q&A to you all, to the audience. So I think we have about 15 minutes for Q&A. And I'm going to just go by hands that I see first. So I'm going to try, and we'll have this gentleman up first, please. What your name is?
Gene Aguilera.
Gene Aguilera.
Yes.
And can you, if you'd like to stand up and project your question, please. We don't have mics going around, so.
Growing up in East L.A. In the 60s, it was just a sense of pride, you know, listening to my little transistor radio and hearing Whittier Boulevard, you know, and it's seeing it rise up the charts, you know, with the Four Tops, the Beatles, the Animals, the Stones, and there it was there. And to me, that kind of, these guys, if the Midnighters could do it, you know, it gave a lot of hope to the East LA barrio. And I want to thank Willie for all his great music and the greatest Chicano band in East LA with 4 albums they made. And I want him to share with the crowd with the great story of the Johnson Market concert. And how that related to the, you know, the Beatles and the Hard Day's Night opening scene.
Thank you.
It's amazing. So Johnson Market is doing a promotional thing, right? And so they get a flatbed trailer, and they invite us to come and play, you know, in the parking lot behind the market. And it was just an incredible afternoon. I'm glad I was wearing suspenders. I lost my really cool suede Beatle boots, got my socks. I had this really nice shirt I just bought, but I had my suspenders. But it was really, the crowd was just insane. They actually began, we had to run. We had to run. We're running up and down Whittier Boulevard and ducking into the crest. And they had these little photo booths. And I remember running in, and I saw it, and I got up on the thing. And I closed the curtain, and I saw all these little tennis shoes running by. And it was yeah, it was reminiscent of a Hard Day's Night. When I finally saw my moment to get out of there, I ran back out to Whittier Boulevard, and they went, "There he is!" Right? And then I look, and Eddie Torres was turning the corner in his brand new 65 Chevy Impala, right? And the windows were rolled down, and I remember diving in. And him speeding off down the boulevard.
Thank you. That was a rollicking answer to a fun question. Right here, please.
Bobby Brambila is my name. I have 2 questions. One was in reference to what Chicano music was like during the 60s. I always felt that it was a cover, we were playing cover songs. We were adding congas, we were adding brass, and it seemed to make it a little bit more unique than those others who were covering the same kind of music. And secondly, Coachella this year, I think, has like 20 Latin groups or Hispanic groups. You think that's kind of a step in the right direction, that we're having more Hispanics being promoted to the outside world? I understand that Mexico is also listening to more and being invited to more of these things.
But what about the Latin Americans? You know, that's from other countries. How about us? Yeah.
Anybody on the panel want to comment to what sounds like, again, maybe a related topic earlier about sort of...
Bobby was in a band called the Enchantments. And, but to me, it seemed that the timbales and congas didn't come till the late 60s. The first band that I ever heard do it was the Village Callers. They were the first ones that Latinized that way. That came later. But
our keyboard player started as a conguero, Ronnie Figueroa. But the conga was unnecessary for us, for what we were doing. But the cool thing is our manager did these shows at the Alexandria Hotel. And so he brought in the groups from Mexico. You know, Los Bukis, Los Moonlights. Los Moonlights were amazing because they would do the Chapel of Dreams in Spanish, you know, and so all this was just, you know, like I say, something that just perpetuated, you know, music as we know it. And we were able to take those influences with us wherever we went. So yeah, you're right.
I tell you that when I started singing with the Village Callers, woo, buddy, they were bad, you know, because they had the congas, they had the two horns, and after that, when they wanted to, the managers got me out of the Village Callers because the other singer was coming back. I didn't know I was a temporary vocalist for them. Okay, and so anyway, they were trying to put me in a band where there were no horns. I said, chale, you know, no. So that's when they got me together with the Organized Set, which was a horn band and another badass band.
That's right.
And there's one of them right there over there, Armando. Yeah.
I see right there, a hand right there. Thank you.
Oh, they championed, you know, they played our records and kept us in touch with our relatives, if you know what I mean. Art LeBeau's really good at that today. But Art LeBeau, Huggy Boy, Godfrey,
yeah.
These guys, man, they were amazing because, I mean, Art especially, I mean, he just, you know, he was on high-powered stations. Huggy Boy eventually went to K-Earth, right? But Godfrey was out of a little storefront there at Flash Records and K-Time, right? K-Time Radio. But these guys, they championed. They played our records and they played a bunch of stuff. They played a lot of R&B and whatnot. But those guys, you know, they gave us a platform. They gave us opportunity. And eventually guys like Casey Kasem and Dave Hall and Sam Riddle, those guys, I mean, they loved us. They really did. They loved us. They hired us for their private parties. And it wasn't payola. You know, they liked us enough that if they didn't like the record, they wouldn't play it. Amen? But they championed the cause, I think, for a lot of us.
And those were the days that those were the days that DJs had the power to play what they wanted to play. It wasn't long after that that the conglomerates started buying a whole bunch of radio stations and would hire a music director who would tell everybody what they can and what they cannot play. I remember the first time when Mark was signed to Ode Records, and the first single that was released, I remember it like the day they killed President Kennedy. I remember it so well because I was driving down Sunset Boulevard coming home from a meeting, and I heard Mark's record on radio. I mean, I just delivered the record a week before, and a DJ picked it up and started playing Mark's, what was it, Rock and Roll Queen?
No, that was Lila Love Me
Lila
Tonight.
Loved Me
That was
Tonight.
produced by Lou Adler, you know,
But it
rock and roll Hall of Famer.
It blew me away, Mark, to hear you on radio because we had just done that record, you know, and it was such a great thrill. As I say, though, that's the days when the DJs could play whatever they wanted. That's gone. That doesn't happen anymore.
I have a question back here. Yes, waving your hand.
Remembering and coming to see you, thank you to the Grammy Museum for inviting me. It's an honor.
What's the name of your band, bro?
El Profe. But back then it used to be Pancho Ward, Pancho Verruga. And so we played on the garage and we played weddings and your songs there. Órale.
Gracias, bro.
We had all that stuff, the horns and everything. So thank you guys. Keep it up. Never give up.
And we'll take one more question. Right here, please. Thank you, with the sunglasses on your head.
Hi, I'm Rosalie. Some of you up there might know me because I support music. First of all, I don't have a question, I have a comment. I didn't like what he just said. Thank you for being up here because you guys are the pioneers. You guys have taught me something that I didn't know by what you're saying, sharing your stories. I think you guys should write books, because, you know, so the younger generation can get a little better, more understanding. But the most thing that I respect about you guys, that you're keeping the term Chicano alive. And that's
right.
through your music and today. Because you can say, you know, we're labeled. We're labeled as Latinx, Hispanic, Latinos. Who labeled all that to us? We are Chicanos, because Chicano to me means part of our roots, incorporating the Mexican music into the music of today. Thank you guys.
You're welcome.
One final question, please. Thank you.
It's not a question again, it's a comment.
Questions.
This comes in full circle because as a retired teacher for 38 years with the Azucena Pike School District, I was only the only Chicana Latina teacher in the middle school. So of course I was the only advocate for our little gente. And the slogan, Mañana es now, along with Si se puede, Gonzalez, everything up in my room, I always taught my kids, Mañana is now. Maestra, can I bring the homework tomorrow? No, Mañana is now. I'm sitting here, smart enough to get it. But, you know, I would write it there and then the board, Mañana is now. And I said, you're Mexican. You know how I spelled Mexican the way it is? It's M-E-X-I-Can. But I decided to share that with you because that's been my favorite song. So with all honor, I give you the Chicano clap.
Yeah.
Do we have time for one more? As long as it's a question for our panelists. Do you have a question, a short question? Right here, one more in the back, that's it. Oh, I didn't see you. Okay, two more questions. Do you have a question? All right.
Oh, yes, yes.
A record store in East L.A.
The Record Inn.
A Record Inn, Record Rack, and Story Music also sold records.
Yeah, those three.
Three.
Yeah. But the Record Inn was really like.
He
that
got
was
all
a
the
spot.
obscure stuff. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Record Inn. Yes.
Whew. The impact of this.
What was cool about your dad was that he was the one that could get any record you asked for. Yeah. You know, anything, he'd find it, he'd deliver it, you know. He was real big on that, and that made him real successful.
Yes.
We were customers, too. God bless you, man.
Now, it really has to be the last question because we have a performance still that we're going to watch. So, one question, please, for the panelists.
All right, I got one question. I'm Eddie B. Hill from went to Salesian High School back in the 60s up there.
Yeah.
But anyway, one quick question, kind of for everybody, but what was the feria like back for you guys?
The money? The money?
Feria.
My first gig, I made $5.
Me too. Oh, no. My first gig, the whole band got $5. We were excited.
I can top that.
Okay, what is it?
When I started, I got $1 a song. So if I got to sing 3 or 4 songs that night, I was a wealthy man.
$5 bought a lot back then too, though. But how much did we get? How did we get like in the early '60s, like at St. Alphonsus, you know, Little Union? Was it like 40, 50 bucks a piece? I'm trying to remember what it was.
Yeah, it was in that range, you know.
Which was a lot of money.
Which wasn't bad.
For teenagers, big money.
But if you had an 8-piece band, you know.
Less money.
Right. I will say this, after the hit record, after we got the hit record, Land of a Thousand Dances, we did something that was really extraordinary. Our manager would book us at 4 places in one night, right? So, and he had a unique, the bands that were on the gigs, we set up this thing where we would use each other's equipment. And then the last place that we played at, our stuff would be set up and we'd take it home. And that nobody ever broke anything or stole anything. That's pretty cool, right? And so we would play Thousand Oaks. Then we'd do the Kaiser Dome in San Bernardino. Then we'd end up at the Kennedy Hall. And then our last gig would be at the Big Union Hall. And he had convinced us that we could be anywhere in Southern California within an hour. Yeah, the Longshoremen's Hall in Wilmington was another spot. But the money got better for us at that point in '60s dollars. You know, I remember in 1964, I actually did 4 gigs. In other words, 4 weekends, and I had enough money to buy a Corvette. In '64, a Corvette was only $3,400. Imagine that, right? So the money did get better for us, for some of us, you know. I wish I would have had Gene as a financial advisor back in those days. Amen. But yeah, people they will pay today, you know, to be entertained, you know, and they honor us by that. By being willing to pay, you know, it takes money, you know, to exist, to move equipment and put on a show and that. So it's getting better, Eddie. Every day it's getting better. Sí se puede.
Sí se puede. Well, that'll close our Q&A session because we still have, let's hear some of those songs that made you those ferias back in the day, yeah? We're going to clear the stage off in just a little bit. We're going to have some entertainment for you all. So stick around, please. Don't go too far. Thank you very much. Thank you one more time to our panelists. Another round of applause, please.
God bless you guys. Thanks for coming out, man.
Thank you.
Make sure you come back in. All right, how you guys doing? Once again, thanks for coming out tonight. This is Bob Robles. Just a little background on, I've been sitting on these songs for several decades. And maybe the record executives didn't come across the river. But there's some individuals here tonight from the West Side that used to come to East L.A. quite a bit to hear the bands and support us. And so we're really grateful for that. Alan Larman's here, I think. I can't see too well, but yeah, that's him right there. Amen. When you're young and full of pep, you take some leaps with no regrets. You can't believe there's danger anywhere. Though you're blind, you try to see with every glance the mysteries they've told you are blowing in summer breeze. So with friends who just like you are growing still in all you do, the music brings us to your ears. There across the bridge in East L.A. Gathered in the village, we would play. Songs that made your heart content. Joy you knew was heaven sent. There across the bridge in East L.A. In the hands of gifted lads, a sound was birthed, so with the bands came rhythm that moved our feet to dance. Young at heart and wisdom too, no culture shock as we pursue the magic of this moment's interlude. Something new and beautifully strange. From everywhere the people came in wonder to the village in East L.A. There across the bridge in East L.A. Gathered in the village, we would play. Songs that made your heart content. Joy you knew was heaven sent. There across the bridge in East L.A. There across the bridge in East L.A. The morning started quietly, people greeting at the bakery. Round the corner came the black and white, screeching tires and flashing lights. Above the sirens howl, we could hear her holler. Ruben Salazar's been killed in the silver dollar. That ugly day in East L.A., black smoke filling the sky, Rasa running every way, tear gas burning their eyes, chaos and bewilderment as the black eye beat into the fray. In a moment we lost our innocence, that ugly day in East L.A. The change we were expecting never reached the city's heights. Terror now projecting Satan's grand disguise. children held in protecting arms while being shoved from behind. We didn't even know what had happened yet. We were fighting in the blind. That ugly day in East L.A. as my people marched with pride was sadly interrupted when our mouthpiece lost his cry. Somebody needs to tell the truth. It never was explained why Reuben had to die that way, that ugly day in East L.A. Zip code is still in America, the land of the brave and the free. We only want what our father said would be ours if only we believe. And yet above the pandemonium, the shrieking pain-filled holler, Ruben Salazar's been killed in the silver dollar. And it didn't stop that day in 1970. No, Thomas Wilson couldn't feel my people's pain. No, that ugly day. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to sing I'm Brown. It's hard to believe it was recorded 50 years ago, 1972. I wrote it in 72. We recorded it 72. And I want to acknowledge the musicians who were on it. On drums was Ernie Hernandez Jr., who is moved up to Eureka, California, and he could not be here tonight. On bass was Rick Rosas, who went on to play and record extensively with Joe Walsh and Neil Young, and unfortunately he passed away in 2014. Rest in peace. And on Hammond organ was Mr. Anthony Beret, who's in the audience. Anthony. Anthony had a great band in East LA called the Emeralds in the 60s. On rhythm guitar and lead guitar, Mr. John Valenzuela here. And I played rhythm guitar, piano, and second lead guitar on it. And it was one of those records that recorded, it wanted to record, it just jumped on the tape, you know, one take basic track, one take piano part, one take our double lead. It was magical. One of the problems, it was 4 minutes and 45 seconds in an era when you're supposed to make a 2 minute and 30-second record, you know. That was one thing that didn't help. Well, I'm singing the original key. I can tell my voice is a little hoarse. Wish me luck. Get this out of the way. And we got Rick Reyes here from the Trio Los Dados. It's just how the universe works. It just so happened I'm playing Saturday at the Quiet Cannon in Montebello with Ray Carrion All-Stars backing me up, and he's playing bass on that gig. So he learned I'm Brown for that gig, and he was here, so he goes, can I play with you? Yeah, jump in. So he's going to add some bass to it. Get this out of the way.
You're brown, you can hang around, but just as long as you don't make a sound. Don't call us, we'll keep in touch, just as long as you don't say too much. So take a step to the back of your heart. It isn't much, but you know it's a start. Don't you know I'm brown? can't you see my face? But I'm first a member of the human race. Don't shout, don't you know I found out? You don't know what you're talking about. Lord knows I know how it goes. Everybody's got to stay on his toes. Hey son, pick that off of the ground. Wake up, see what's going down. Don't you know I'm brown? Can't you see my face? But I'm first a member of the human race. Don't cry, I never say die. Don't you know that it's only a lie? Don't quit, duck, don't get hit. We're gonna make it bit by bit. Hey boy, get that shine on my shoes. You can't laugh when you're living the blues. Don't you know I'm brown? Can't you see my face? But I'm first a member of the human race. Thank you. Thank you. Where's Geree? Are you hiding, Geree? Yes. Hiding again. Okay. Oh.
This song was written by Mark Guerrero. And at one point in time, I was looking for some music to record. So I heard this one song, and it was called Mijito. So I changed the gender to Mijita. And I'm sure that a lot of the women here are moms or daughters, and you'll be able to relate to this. It was actually my mother's favorite song, and she got to hear it before she passed away.
I wrote this originally for my mom. It's a tribute to a mother, my mother, who was very encouraging. So it's a song about a mother who's there for her son, and it was a tribute to my mother. And like I said, it worked for Geree wonderfully. She sang it incredibly, and it's called Mijita.
When I was a young girl, my mama said to me these soothing words that led me to find my destiny. Mijita, now don't you worry, you've got a lot of time. So don't you hurry, mira mijita, I've got faith in you. You got a good mind, and you know what to do. Ay, madrecita, it's hard to find the words to thank you for all the good you've done. With your belief in me, you helped to that I could find my place in the sun. She'd always say, mijita, now don't you worry, you've got a lot of time, so don't you hurry, no, mira, mijita, I've got faith in you. You've got a good mind, and you know what to do. When I was losing, and it was all too much to bear, and temptations of the city had me blind, well, I fought those demons back, and I jumped back on the track. Loving words resounding in my mind. Yes, she'd always say, mijita, mijita, now don't you worry, mijita, you've got a lot of time, so don't you hurry, no, 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 mira, mijita, I've got faith in you. You got a good mind, ooh, and you know what to do. She'd always say, mijita, mijita, mira, mira, mi mijita, mijita, Dios te bendiga, mijita, mijita, mira, mira, mi mijita, mijita, mi chiquita, mijita.
Yeah, Geree. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mark Guerrero.
Geree.
What is your name? Ruth? This is for you.
Let's see what's happening here.
This next song was actually written by the producer that was up here, Art Brambila. So nice round of applause for Art. I was extremely proud of the fact that he invited me to sing on this album, Si Se Puede.
Too many years we have toiled in the fields of Northern California. For too long those crops have controlled us. Oh, but we've worked on our knees too long. Yes, we've been on our knees too long. Dear Lord, you know we thought we'd never win with that political machine all around us. Our hopes were lost to the injustice that surrounds us, until that man, that brave brown man, proved we can. until that man, that brave brown man proved we can. Despierta, mi bien, despierta. That great myth is over. Mañana is now. Mañana is now. Mañana is now. Sí se puede.
So in 2008, 2009, when I'm Brown was first in the Grammy Museum on the same exhibit, it was there on its own. This time they added one of my dad's records to it, so my dad's record and mine are side by side, which is really cool. And the record that's there is called El Chicano. And he wrote it in the late 70s, and it's really a great Chicano pride song. It's in Spanish. The first few lines are what I described earlier about us not being accepted in either country. So here it goes. It's called El Chicano.
Yo soy chicano, señores. Nací al lado americano. Para México soy pocho. No aceptan mis hermanos. Los gringos me discriminan como si fuera extranjero. A pesar de que esta tierra fue de México primero. Este país es mi tierra. México es la de mis padres. Pero la sangre que llevo es la de Benito Juárez. ¡Ay! ¡Uy! Yo soy purito chicano, de raza que no se raja. Mi madre nació en Sonora, mi padre fue de la Baja. Mis padres me inculcaron su cultura desde chavo. No es mi culpa haber nacido al otro lado del Bravo. Me da mucho sentimiento que en México no me quieran, porque a México lo quiero más que a mi tierra. ¡Ay! Como Emiliano Zapata y también Francisco Villa, yo soy revolucionario en este moderno día. Unidos a César Chávez, los mexicoamericanos luchamos por la justicia para todo el mexicano. Por mi educación bilingüe hablo chicano y cabacho. Ya despedí este pocho, hasta luego, ya los guachos.
Yeah, okay, I'm short. Chaparrita pero picosa.
Ay, ay, ay.
Mark, how old is this song? How old is this
This goes back hundreds of years in Mexico.
That would be New Mexico.
We don't know this song.
But you guys got to sing with us.
You'll know immediately. You'll know immediately. Here we go.
Para bailar la bamba, para bailar la bamba se necesita una poca de gracia pa' mi partida, arriba y arriba, ay arriba y arriba, por ti seré, por ti seré, por ti seré.
Yo no soy marinera, yo no soy marinera, soy capitán, soy capitán, soy capitán. Bamba, bamba,
bamba, bamba.
Bamba, bamba, bamba.
En mi casa me dicen, en mi casa me dicen el abusado, porque tengo la llave del excusado. Bamba, bamba, ah, bamba, 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 bamba.
Para subir al cielo, para subir al cielo se necesita una escalera grande, otra chiquita, arriba y arriba, ay arriba y arriba, por ti seré, por ti seré, por ti seré. Bamba, bamba. Bamba, 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 bamba. East L.A., baby.
Dios mío, mi gente, hermanas, hermanos, give it up.
You guys look pretty good, too.
We don't have anything else.
Let me tell you this, as the curator and director of exhibitions, here at the Grammy Museum. We are so thankful for everyone to come out tonight. This is part one. We are going to do this again. Take my word. So, buenas noches a todos. Get home safe. Vive la raza. Thank you all for coming out. Have a good evening.